The dawn in this part of Texas has a cruel sort of beauty. It bleeds across the horizon in shades of blood orange and bruised purple, promising a heat that will suck the life out of anything that isn't already dead. For 5 years, I'd watched that same sun rise over this godforsaken ranch, and it never felt like a new day. It just felt like a fresh coat of paint on a tomb. My tomb. But this morning was supposed to be different. This morning I was waiting for salvation. I stood on my porch, the worn wood groaning under my boots like an old man's bones. I'd washed my face, even run a comb through my hair for the first time in what felt like a decade. My best shirt, the one I'd saved from the fire, felt stiff and foreign against my skin. It was the shirt I married Sarah in. The thought soured my mouth, but I pushed it down. Sarah was ash and memory. Today was for Margaret Williams. Margaret was a promise scrawled on perfumed paper, a lifeline tossed across 1,000 miles of dust and regret. We'd written for 6 months. I sent her portraits of the ranch taken from its most flattering angles, omitting the fields that had gone fallow and the barn that still bore scorch marks from the night my world ended. I sent her money for the train, enough for her to travel in comfort. In my letters, I was not Samuel Crawford, the hollowed-out ghost of a man who spoke more to his whiskey bottle than to another living soul. I was Sam, a man of prospects, a man offering a good, honest life. A man who could erase his loneliness with the arrival of a single train. The horizon shimmered, and then a shape emerged from the heat haze. Not the neat buggy I'd paid old man Hemlock to drive, but a clumsy, dust-caked wagon. My heart, a sluggish muscle that rarely did more than keep me upright, started to hammer. A cloud of red Texas dirt followed the wagon like a plague. I squinted. That wasn't Hemlock on the driver's seat. It was Pete Morrison, a man whose primary occupations were drinking at the saloon and burying the town's dead. His face, even from 100 yards, looked as grim as one of his customers. A cold dread, slick and oily, began to seep into my gut. This wasn't the arrival of a bride. This was the delivery of bad news. Pete. I called out, my voice cracking from disuse. I walked down the steps, my boots kicking up the same red dirt that clung to his wagon. Where's Miss Williams? The train from St. Louis arrived on time. He pulled the mule to a halt and climbed down slowly, deliberately avoiding my eyes like a man who owes a debt he can't pay. He took off his hat and wiped a river of sweat from his brow with the back of a filthy sleeve. Sam. He started, his voice a low, gravelly thing. She ain't coming. The world tilted. The bright, hopeful morning seemed to dim. What do you mean she ain't coming? Was there an accident? Is she ill? Pete finally looked at me, and his eyes were full of a pity I didn't want. Worse in your case. Got herself hitched. Banker in St. Louis, from what the station master said. She sent this instead. The words were a physical blow. A banker. While I was cleaning my damn house and mending fences, dreaming of a human voice to fill the silence, she was getting married to a banker. The whole thing had been a lie. A cruel game. The loneliness I was trying to escape came rushing back, a tidal wave of icy despair. Sent what I finally managed to grind out, my hands clenching into fists at my sides. A letter of apology. A refund for the damned ticket. Pete didn't answer. He just walked to the back of the wagon, his movements heavy with a significance I couldn't yet comprehend. He grabbed the corner of a grimy canvas tarp stained with God knows what, and with one heave, pulled it away. And my world shattered for the second time in 5 years. Huddled together like a nest of terrified possums sat 7 children. 7 sets of eyes, wide and hollow, stared at me. They were a collage of misery. Filthy with torn clothes that hung off their bony frames. Faces streaked with dirt and tears framed by matted, lifeless hair. The oldest, a boy who couldn't have been more than 12, had his arms wrapped protectively around a tiny slip of a girl with blonde hair, so caked with grime it looked like a clump of straw. The youngest might have been 4, maybe 5. His thumb stuck in his mouth, his gaze vacant. They weren't just children. They were wreckage. A growl rumbled up from my chest, raw and feral. "What the hell is this? Pete found them at the station," Pete mumbled, shoving a crumpled piece of paper into my hand. "With this note pinned to the boy's shirt. Said to give it to you." My hand shook as I unfolded the paper. The handwriting was not Margaret's elegant script. It was a crude, hasty scrawl. "Mr. Crawford, they belong to you now." The words swam before my eyes. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a deliberate, calculated act of cruelty. Margaret, or whoever she was, hadn't just abandoned me. She had burdened me. She had taken my desperate plea for companionship and twisted it into this grotesque mockery. The children remained absolutely unnervingly silent. They didn't cry or fidget. They just stared, their bodies pressed together, bracing for a blow. They expected me to be a monster. And right then, I felt like one. "I can't take this." My voice cracked, betraying the rage. "Pete, I can't take care of 7 kids. I was expecting a wife, a partner, not a goddamn orphanage." I gestured wildly at the empty land around us, at the silent house that was my prison. "What am I supposed to do with them?" Pete shrugged, his expression unreadable. "Whoever sent him paid me good money for the ride out here. Gold coin. Said you'd know what to do. My job's done, Sam." He wouldn't look at the children. He climbed back onto his wagon, took up the reins, and without another word turned the mule around and headed back toward town, leaving me alone on a dusty road with a living, breathing curse. I stood there, the crumpled note in my fist, as the wagon disappeared back into the heat. The silence it left behind was deafening. It stretched between me and those 7 statues of fear, a chasm of disbelief and fury. Then the little blonde girl started to cry. It wasn't a loud, childish wail. It was a soft, hopeless sound, the kind of sound an animal makes when it knows it's caught in a trap. That small sound sliced through my anger like a razor. It cut right through the layers of bitterness and self-pity and hit something deep inside me. Something I thought had burned to cinders 5 years ago. I thought of Sarah. I thought of my own little boy Daniel, his laughter echoing in a house that was now just a shell. I thought of the endless nights spent with a bottle as my only companion, trying to drink away memories that were etched onto my soul. This loneliness. It was a cancer eating me from the inside out. I had invited a stranger to come and maybe, just maybe, cut it out. And instead, she'd sent me 7 more tumors. How could anyone expect me to fix 7 broken children when I was still in pieces myself? My gaze fell on the oldest boy, Tommy, as I'd later learn. His hands clenched in the fabric of the little girl's dress were a roadmap of pain. They were covered in half-healed cuts and angry red scars, fresh and brutal. And his eyes. God, his eyes. They held a terror that no child should ever carry, a weary knowledge of evil that made my own grief feel selfish and small. For 3 hours they just sat there on my porch steps. 3 solid hours. I tried everything. I offered them water. I asked them questions. I tried a gentle voice, then a firm one. Nothing. They were 7 stones carved from fear, deaf and mute to the world. "Look," I finally said, crouching down to their level, the strain making my knees pop. The smell of unwashed bodies and pure misery hit me full in the face. "I need to know your names. I need to know where you came from. I can't help you if you don't talk to me." Silence. Tommy just pulled the others closer, his scarred hands trembling almost imperceptibly. He was their shield, their shepherd, and he was just a boy. The little blonde girl had stopped crying, but her eyes were wide, vacant, like she had retreated somewhere deep inside herself where no one could reach her. My patience, already worn to a transparent thread, snapped. I had cattle lowing in the fields, a fence line near the creek that needed mending. I had a life to get back to, or at least the routine that passed for one. A routine that did not include babysitting a flock of mute, terrified orphans. I stood up, dusting off my knees. That's it. I'm taking you back to town. There's an orphanage in Jasper County. They'll know what to do with you. That did it. The oldest boy finally spoke. No. The word was barely a whisper, a rustle of dry leaves, but it carried the weight of absolute soul-shattering terror. He looked up at me, his eyes pleading. Please, mister, don't take us back. They'll find us. The air grew thick. Who will find you? I asked, my voice softer now. His mouth clamped shut as if he'd said too much. The steel door slammed down behind his eyes again. But he'd said enough. I started to look at them differently. These weren't just hungry, abused children. They were hunted. I saw it now. The way they jumped at the sound of a hawk's cry, the way their heads swiveled, constantly positioning themselves to watch every direction at once, like a deer herd sensing wolves on the wind. They were on the run from something. And whatever it was, it had scared them beyond words. Against every rational thought in my head, against the voice screaming at me to cut my losses and drive them to town myself, I gestured toward the house. Inside. Get inside. My house, a place of echoing emptiness for 5 years, suddenly felt suffocatingly small. They huddled in a corner of my kitchen, a tight knot of humanity, while I stared into my pantry trying to figure out what you feed a pack of stray children. All I had were beans, cornbread mix, and jerky. It would have to do. As I worked, their eyes followed my every move. I could feel their collective gaze on my back, watching, waiting. My mind raced. Someone had deliberately sent them to me. To me. Samuel Crawford, the recluse on the edge of nowhere. Why, I'd never mentioned wanting children in my letters to Margaret. The idea was absurd. It was the furthest thing from my mind. Suddenly, a tiny tug on my sleeve. I looked down. It was the little blonde girl. She pointed a trembling finger at her mouth, then patted her flat stomach. Hungry. That at least was a problem with a simple solution. I served up plates of beans and cornbread, and they fell on the food like starving dogs. They didn't use forks so much as shoveled the food in with their hands, their eyes darting around as if expecting someone to snatch the plates away at any moment. While they ate, I saw more. The second oldest boy, maybe 10, had what looked like old rope burns around his wrists, chafed and raw. A dark-haired girl flinched violently when I moved too quickly to get more water from the pump. Jesus Christ, I muttered under my breath, watching them. What in God's name happened to you kids? The oldest boy? Tommy looked up from his plate, his face a mess of beans and suspicion. His voice was low, almost accusatory. Are you gonna hurt us? The question hit me like a physical punch, knocking the air from my lungs. It was so simple, so direct. It was the only question that mattered to them. No, I said, my own voice thick with an emotion I couldn't name. No, I'm not gonna hurt you. His gaze didn't waver. A chilling, dead-eyed wisdom settled on his young features. The last man said that too. Before I could ask what he meant, what last man, his attention was back on his food. The door was closed again. My hands clenched into white-knuckled fists on the countertop. A cold, hard anger was building inside me, not at the children, not at Margaret anymore, but at the faceless, nameless shadow that had done this to them. As evening began to bleed into the sky, painting the windows with shades of dusk, I heard it. a sound that made the hairs on my arms stand on end. Hoofbeats. Not one horse, multiple horses, riding hard and fast toward my ranch. The children heard it too. The clatter of forks on tin plates stopped. 7 heads snapped up. Panic, stark and electric, flashed across their faces. They scrambled to their feet, plates forgotten, overturning a stool in their haste. They looked like a flock of birds startled by a shotgun blast. "Hide us," Tommy whispered, his voice urgent, strangled with fear. He grabbed my arm, his small hand surprisingly strong. "Please, mister. If they find us, they'll kill us. Kill them. Children." The words seemed obscene in the quiet of my kitchen. I strode to the window and peered out. Through the fading light, I saw them. 4 riders moving with grim purpose. Even at this distance, I could see they were armed to the teeth, silhouettes of pure menace against the dying sun. One of them was pointing directly at my house. The monster they were running from had a face, and it had just arrived on my doorstep. My old life, the life of a grieving recluse, ended in that instant. I turned from the window, my body moving before my brain had fully caught up. My hands reached up and took down the Winchester rifle from its pegs above the fireplace. The weight of it was familiar, a cold comfort. "Get in the cellar." I commanded, my voice a low growl I barely recognized as my own. Now. The children didn't need to be told twice. Tommy yanked open the heavy trap door in the kitchen floor I hadn't opened in years, revealing a black, musty-smelling square of darkness. They scrambled down the ladder like their lives depended on it. And as I heard the heavy thud of hooves pulling up in my yard, I was starting to realize they probably did. The riders stopped 50 yards from the house. Through the grimy window pane, I could see them clearly now. 4 hard men, the kind that infest border towns and mining camps. They had the look of wolves, lean and hungry, and with no light in their eyes. The leader, a tall, whip-thin man in a black hat, swung down from his horse. He walked toward my porch with the unhurried confidence of a man who gets paid to instill fear, someone who has done this 100 times before. "Crawford." His voice boomed sharp and imperious. It cut through the evening air like a whip crack. "Name's Jessup. I'm looking for some property that belongs to my employer. Some runaways." I stepped out onto the porch, the Winchester held loosely in my hand, its barrel pointed at the floorboards. But my thumb was resting on the hammer. "Don't know what you're talking about. This is my land. There's nothing here that ain't mine." Jessup smiled, but it was the kind of smile a snake might give just before it strikes. It didn't touch his dead eyes. 7 children. We tracked him to the train station in St. Louis. Witnesses saw him get into a wagon headed this direction. Runaway. Workers. Workers. My stomach twisted into a cold, hard knot. They were children. "They're just kids," I said, my voice dangerously low. "Children old enough to work?" Jessup countered, spitting a brown stream of tobacco juice into the dirt. "Children worth good money. Now I can do this easy, or I can do this hard, Crawford. Makes no never mind to me. Your choice." My mind raced. These weren't just abused children from some horrific orphanage. They were slaves. In the year of our Lord, 1885, 20 years after a war that was supposed to end this filth, someone was still buying and selling human beings. Children. And these bounty hunters were here to drag them back to whatever hell they'd escaped from. "There are no children here." I lied, my voice as steady as I could make it. The lie felt solid in my mouth. It felt right. Jessup nodded slowly, that predatory smile widening. He gestured to his men. "Spread out. Check the barn, the outbuildings." Then he looked back at me. "See, that's where you're wrong. My employer, Mr. Blackwood, he has trackers that can follow a ghost across a salt flat. We know they're here. And Mr. Blackwood, he don't take kindly to people who interfere with his property. Ezra Blackwood. The name dropped into the pit of my stomach like a lead weight. I'd heard the name whispered in saloons, a boogeyman rumored to run illegal mining camps and timber operations all over Texas. Places where men went in, but they never came out. They're not property, I snarled, the words tearing out of me. They're human beings. Jessup's hand drifted down, hovering over the butt of his Colt. They're whatever I say they are, rancher. And right now, they're coming with me. Dead or alive. Makes no difference to the pay. That was it. I raised my Winchester until the barrel was level with his chest. Get off my land. And then from behind the house, a child screamed. A single high-pitched shriek of pure terror. One of his men had found something. My blood went cold as I realized with a jolt of horror that the cellar must have an outside access door, a root cellar hatch I'd boarded up and forgotten years ago. Found 'em, a voice shouted from the back. Hiding in a hole like 7 little rabbits? Jessup's grin was triumphant. Well now, that settles that, don't it? I heard boots pounding on the floorboards inside my own house. The kitchen door burst open, and Tommy stumbled out, his face a mess of tears and dirt. They got Emma. They got the little ones. Right behind him was one of Jessup's men, a brutish oaf with a greasy beard dragging the little blonde girl by her arm. She was kicking and crying, a tiny doll being manhandled by a monster. So helpless. Let her go, I roared, swinging the rifle toward the man. I don't think so, Jessup said, his voice deadly calm. His own gun was drawn now, a black eye staring directly at my heart. You see, Crawford, you just made this personal. Nobody steals from Ezra Blackwood and lives to tell about it. He gestured with his pistol at my rifle. Now you're going to put that rifle down and help us round up the rest of our property. Or this little girl. She's going to have a very painful, very short trip back to the mines. The little girl whimpered a broken sound. I looked into her terrified, tear-filled blue eyes. And for a shattering moment, it wasn't her face I saw. It was my own daughter's face, looking up at me through the smoke and flames just before the roof of our home caved in. Something inside Samuel Crawford, something that had been dead and buried for 5 long years, finally snapped. My Winchester fired. I don't remember making the conscious decision. My finger just tightened, and the world exploded in sound and fire. The shot caught Jessup's man in the shoulder, spinning him around with a howl of pain. The little girl Emma was free. She scrambled away and dove behind the porch railing, where Tommy pulled her into his arms. Bad choice, Crawford Jessup roared, diving for cover behind a large water trough at the edge of the yard. A storm of lead erupted. I pumped another round into the chamber and threw myself behind the solid oak of my own porch railing as bullets ripped through the air. Wood splintered around my head, spraying me with sharp projectiles. Jessup's remaining men were firing from 3 different positions, pinning me down. There's 6 more of us in that cellar, Tommy shouted over the thunderous gunfire. They'll find them. They'll kill them. My mind sharpened by a past I'd long tried to forget, calculated with chilling speed. 4 men. 1 wounded Jessup down, 2 more firing. Limited ammunition. No real cover except this porch. But I'd survived Shiloh. This was not worse than that. What's your name, boy? I yelled during a brief lull as one of the men reloaded. Tommy Hendricks. All right, Tommy. You know how to shoot? Yes, sir. His voice came back shockingly steady. They made us hunt for food at the camps. My own pistol was tucked in my belt. I pulled it free, checked the load, and slid it across the splintered porch boards toward him. There's a window on the side of the house. Get there, watch that cellar door. Don't you let them get to the others? Tommy snatched the gun with hands that barely shook. My God, this kid. He had more steel in his spine than most men I knew. More gunfire erupted from the barn. Jessup was pinned down, but his men were trying to advance. I counted their shots. The one near the barn was reloading. This was my only chance. I burst from cover, charging low and fast toward the water trough. Jessup looked up, his eyes wide with surprise, fumbling with his cartridges. My rifle butt connected with his jaw in a sickening crunch. He dropped like a sack of feed. One down. But the others were closing in. I heard boots pounding on the dry earth. One appeared from around the corner of the house, his rifle already raised. A crack echoed from the side window of the house. Tommy's pistol shot. The man cried out, stumbling backward, clutching a bloody leg. Not a kill shot, but enough. Behind you, Tommy's desperate shout. I spun just as the last bounty hunter rounded the other side of the house. We fired in the same heart-stopping instant. I felt a searing, white-hot poker tear across my ribs. It felt like being branded. My own shot was true. The man grunted, a red flower blooming on his chest, and fell face first into the dirt. 2 dead, 1 wounded, Jessup unconscious. But I was bleeding, and the world was starting to get hazy at the edges. A wet, warm stickiness was spreading across my shirt. Somewhere in the back of my mind, I heard crying from the cellar. Trapped, terrified. A shadow moved near the barn. The wounded man. He was dragging himself, trying to circle around. "Tommy," I called out, my voice strained. "Barn. Can you see the barn?" "Yes, sir. He's moving behind it. He's trying for the outside cellar hatch." I heard Tommy cock the pistol again. A 12-year-old boy holding the line. Then another sound drifted on the wind. A sound that froze the blood in my veins. Hoofbeats. Again. But this time it was more. So many more. From the east. Through the swirling dust and gunpowder smoke, I saw a new column of riders. At least 6, maybe more. Riding hard. Jessup was stirring blood and saliva drooling from his broken jaw. He looked up, saw the riders, and a painful, horrific grin spread across his face. "That'll be the rest of them," he rasped. "Blackwood's main enforcers. You're a dead man, Crawford. And those children are going home." I looked at Tommy's pale, determined face in the window. I thought of the 6 terrified souls huddled in the dark beneath my house. My ranch was about to become a slaughterhouse, and I was about to make the last decision of my life. I dragged myself to my feet, my hand pressed hard against my bleeding side. "Tommy," I shouted, my voice roaring with an authority I hadn't used since the army. "Get the others out of the cellar. Take them to the deep woods behind the barn now." "What about you?" he cried, his voice breaking for the first time. "I'm buying you time." I grabbed my last box of cartridges from my pocket and staggered toward an overturned wagon, giving me a better line of sight. "Go." The new wave of riders hit my property line like a cavalry charge. I opened fire, dropping the lead rider from his saddle. But there were too many. They spread out, using my own outbuildings for cover, professional and deadly. Bullets pinged off the metal-rimmed wheels of the wagon. My vision was blurring badly. How much longer could I hold on? Behind me, I heard Tommy herding the other children from the cellar, their terrified cries mixing with the sounds of battle. Good kid. A surge of pride, fierce and hot, coursed through me. A bullet splintered the wood inches from my face. I returned fire, but my arm was heavy, my aim unsteady. Then I heard it. Impossible. Unbelievable. A bugle call. Clear and sharp, it echoed across the valley. It wasn't the sound of bandits or bounty hunters. It was organized, disciplined. And then from the north, cresting the ridge, I saw them. A column of blue-uniformed cavalry, at least 20 strong, riding hard, their rifles ready. Sunlight glinted off their buttons and buckles. They looked like avenging angels descending into my personal hell. Jessup, who had managed to sit up, stared at them, his mouth hanging open in utter disbelief. What the hell? The cavalry didn't hesitate. They hit Blackwood's men like a thunderclap. It wasn't a fight. It was a rout. Professional soldiers against hired killers was no contest. Within minutes, the gunfire stopped. The only sound was the wind, the groans of the wounded, and the nervous stamping of horses. A cavalry captain, a weathered man with sergeant stripes and kind, tired eyes, dismounted and walked toward me. "Samuel Crawford," he asked, his gaze taking in my bloody side, and the rifle still clutched in my hand. I just nodded my head, swimming, trying to process what had just happened. How did you know?" "We received a telegram yesterday in Austin, forwarded from a marshal in St. Louis," he explained. "Said a man by your name might need help protecting some children. Said we should ride at dawn today, just in case." He looked around at the carnage at the bodies littering my yard. "Looks like the information was solid." Who sent the telegram?" I stammered. Before he could answer, Tommy came running back from the edge of the woods, the 6 other children trailing behind him like a flock of ducklings. They were terrified, but they were alive. Emma, the little blonde girl, was clutching Tommy's hand as if he were her only anchor in the world. "Are the bad men gone?" she whispered. I knelt, ignoring the screaming protest from my ribs. "Yes, sweetheart," I said, my voice thick. "They're gone for good." The captain held out a folded piece of paper. "This came with the telegram. The sender said you'd understand it when you read it." My hands trembled as I took the note. The paper was clean, the handwriting feminine, careful, and achingly familiar. My heart stopped. It was from Margaret. I read it aloud, my voice barely a whisper, the words changing everything. "Dear Samuel, by the time you read this, you will likely understand why I could not come to be your wife. I am not the simple woman you imagine. For months I have been working with federal marshals gathering evidence against Ezra Blackwood's horrific child slavery operations. 3 weeks ago, I discovered he was planning to move these 7 children to a new undocumented mine in Colorado. They would have disappeared forever. We had no legal means to stop it in time. There was no time. You, Samuel, with your isolated ranch and your deep abiding loneliness, were my only hope. A desperate, wild gamble. I knew Blackwood's men would follow. The cavalry was my only other card to play. They know to come if they do not receive a wire from me by noon today. I am sorry for the deception, but their lives depended on it. Please forgive me. These children have no one else in this world. You wrote that you wanted a family to heal your broken heart. Please, Samuel, give them the family they so desperately deserve. With all my respect, Margaret." I looked up from the letter, my mind reeling. She hadn't been toying with me. She hadn't betrayed me. She had used me. Used my loneliness as a weapon, a shield to save 7 lives. He should have been furious. Instead, a wave of profound, humbling respect washed over me. She was a hero. She saved us. Tommy asked, his eyes wide with awe. "Looks like it's son." I said the word son, feeling strangely natural on my tongue. The captain stepped forward. "Miss Williams's evidence will be enough to bring Blackwood down for good. Legally, these children are free now, kidnapped from various orphanages over the past few years. They need a place to go. 7 pairs of eyes were on me. 7 small faces, waiting for my verdict, waiting to see if I would be just another adult who would abandon them." I looked at Tommy, the boy who'd become a man in a single afternoon. I looked at Emma, who was now tentatively peeking out from behind his leg. I saw the twin girls who clutched each other's hands, the boy with the rope burns, and Sarah, the quiet girl with the hollow eyes. I thought about my silent, empty house, my lonely dinners, my perfectly ordered, perfectly miserable existence. I thought of the future. I'd planned a quiet life, with a wife to share the silence. "Tommy," I said, my voice quiet but firm, "what do you kids want?" His chin came up. There was no hesitation. "We want to stay together. They split up families at the camps. We promised each other. We'd never be separated again, no matter what." "All 7 of you?" "Yes, sir. All 7. I looked around my ranch. The barn would need expanding. The house would need new rooms. I'd need more livestock, larger crops. It would be a mountain of work, a lifetime of expense and chaos. It was the complete opposite of the peace I thought I wanted. But as I watched Tommy gently wipe a smudge of dirt from Emma's cheek, I realized that peace wasn't what I needed. I had been trying to fill an old hole left by a lost family. Maybe the answer wasn't to fill it, but to build something new from the ground up, right on the same scarred earth. "All right," I said, and my own voice sounded stronger than it had in years. "All right. You can stay. All of you." A collective, silent sigh of relief seemed to pass through them. "But there are going to be rules. You're going to work. This ranch needs help. You're going to learn to read and write. And you're going to be a family. You understand? The little blonde girl?" Emma took a hesitant step forward. She looked up at me, a tiny, fragile question in her wide blue eyes. For the first time since she had arrived in this dusty hell, a small, shy smile touched her lips. Does that mean you're going to be our daddy?" I knelt down again, the pain in my side, a dull, distant ache. I looked into her face, and for the first time in 5 long years, I saw not the ghost of my past, but the promise of a future. My heart, a block of petrified wood, seemed to crack open, and something warm and bright flooded in. "Yeah, sweetheart," I said, the words feeling more right than anything I had ever said. I guess that's exactly what it means.